And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another special edition, off-season edition of the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jared Morris, and I have assembled an all-star crew tonight to break down the latest happenings in the IU off-season, because every time with IU basketball that you think you can just have a few weeks to kind of coast and relax a little bit, take a little time off, stuff happens. And unfortunately, this time, some not so good stuff happened, which a lot of us know about, of course, with Devin Davis and Hunter Mascara-Perea being removed from the team. So we're going to talk about that, talk about our thoughts on that situation, how it impacts next year's team, as well as talk about some positive stuff, like Indiana being mentioned as a top 10, top 15 team for next year, and, of course, the exciting ACC Big Ten Challenge matchup that was announced with Indiana and Duke. And we actually have someone here with us tonight who is apparently going to that game. Chronic Hoosier, who is with us, Ryan Phillips, and also Will DeWitt, who was our intern last year and has become a full-time, very much valued part of the Assembly Call team. He will be here as well. And we thank you for being here. If you have any questions for us tonight, you can tweet us with the hashtag Assembly Call. You can also go chat on the YouTube page. We'll be checking that as well if you have any questions there. So to start, I want to go around the horn and just get everybody's thoughts on the dismissal of Devin Davis and Hunter Mascara-Perea. And feel free to take this wherever you want. I think I'll lead off simply by saying that when I heard that this had happened, it seemed to me that there was really only one course of action for Tom Crean to take. And as much as we've all rooted for Devin Davis and we're excited about his progress at the end of his freshman year and how he played in Canada and the hope that he could come back and contribute. And as excited as I was for what Hunter Mascara-Perea could do as a seventh or eighth man off the bench, where he could come in, give some energy, really play a role that I thought fit him better than being a starting five-man, as excited as I was for that, at some point enough has to be enough. And with all the discipline problems that have been going on in the program for the last 18 months, I don't know how Tom Crean or this program could have maintained any credibility and any semblance of discipline if these two guys weren't removed. And that's disappointing to say, and I don't think the particular crime in this case is that egregious, but it's the decision-making. And unfortunately, this program, both on and off the court, has been plagued by poor decision-making recently. And on the recent episode of Podcast on the Brink, I talked with Alex and Ryan about this, Ryan Carrazza, and they didn't necessarily think that there's a connection between off-court decision-making and on-court decision-making, and maybe there's not. But at some point, again, you've got to draw the line. And so I applaud Tom Crean and the athletic department for making a tough decision, but doing what they had to do. And now Indiana moves forward, still with a roster, obviously, that looks very good, looks loaded enough to compete in a very competitive Big Ten. But as disappointed as I am to see Devin Davis and Hunter Mascara-Perea go, I think it's what had to be done. So that's my opening thought on it. I want to go around the horn now and hear what you guys think. And Chronic, we will start with you.
I agree. It was absolutely the right decision. It was something that had to be made. This has been a pattern of issues that's plagued the program. I mean, if you go back to, it was February of last year with Hunter's DUI. In the last 18 months, there were 9 different players, by my count, involved in 5 incidents. We'll lump Troy and Stan's last summer transgressions together. But there were a string of incidents. Unfortunately, we were able to make it through the season without any of those popping up on us again. But it's just been a really, really disappointing display of transgressions, violations. And I understand that there's the whole college kids are going to do what college kids are going to do, and trust me, nobody on the internet understands that theory and has lived it more truly than I have. There's a lot of lessons to be learned, and there's a lot of fun to be had, and sometimes you step afoul of the rules. That being said, though, as it relates to Devin and Hunter, these are the two guys who were involved with the 2 incidents that involved endangerment. And to me, that's really the bright red line there. When you have a history of poor decision making that has been proven to endanger yourself and those around you, that's something that can't be taken lightly. And when you continue to have repeated violations after that, at some point risk management has to kick in and say, look, we can't keep these guys on. We live in a day and age right now where, and it's not just an IU thing. A lot of people have tried to make a lot of these issues kind of IU centric. And while it might make for a great narrative, the fact is colleges across the country, young people across the country, even that aren't enrolled in colleges, are dealing with these very same issues of binge drinking, of substance abuse, and all these things. And there's some detrimental effects that are being felt far and wide. But as it relates to IU, it's going to be really difficult for the athletic department, for the president's office to explain how we continue to support these guys if another event happened down the road after their demonstrated history. I think they completely took the they took the call out of the administration's hands with this most recent event.
Ryan, what about you?
Well, I completely agree with Chronic. I think he makes a great point with the endangerment issue. And, I think both of these issues for both of these guys, with the car accident and the DUI, that's different than having a fake ID little 500 week, I think, or a first, test on a first popping for a drug test the first time. I think that after those incidents, you've got to clean up your act, or you don't. It's a privilege to be an Indiana basketball player and to be on scholarship at a school like Indiana, and you have to earn that, and you have to keep earning it, and to screw up and know the issues with the program, especially going into last season with everything that went down, and to not follow through on your commitment to remain clean and take your responsibility to the school and to the fans seriously. I think that just shows a complete lack of judgment. And let me say this: Devin Davis and Hunter, I don't think they're bad kids. I will wish them well and root for them wherever they go. But at this point, Indiana just could not afford to have them on the roster right now. And I applaud Tom Crean. I think a lot of people around the fan base have been waiting a long time for him to make a move like this. And I thought it showed as Chronic said, it wasn't much of a decision, but there was no, beating around the bush. They made a quick, pretty fast decision on this once they got all the facts from the police, and, that was the right move, and I think it was a strong move, and it sent a message to not only the team here, but the kids coming in and people who will play here in the future that, look, everybody gets a second chance, but don't screw up that second chance. I mean, and I think that from now on we should operate with a zero tolerance policy for things of this nature. I mean, put off the pot smoking for 4 years. I mean, it's the least you can do. You're on scholarship, and it's something you're tested for regularly. Just put it aside for. I realize it's rampant in college now, and it's easy to get a hold of, but put it aside for a few years and focus on your studies and playing basketball, because that's what you're there for.
And Will, I'm curious to get your perspective on this as a student. A lot of times when there are stories like this come up, there are justifications for, well, it wasn't that bad, this, that, or the other, and maybe as an isolated incident, it wasn't. Obviously, it seems like it was the pattern of behavior that led to this. How did you view this? Did you view this any differently, or did you kind of think the same thing, that this was really the only option?
I've been thinking the same as most of you guys. I think you three pretty much said everything that I'm thinking personally. Like Ryan just said, you're here for 4 years. You're here to be a basketball player. You have every privilege that you can possibly get. Just put it off for 4 years. How hard could it really be? I really wish that both players could have figured it out after the first incident. Well, multiple incidents. But I think Tom Crean did do the correct thing, and he sent a message that I hope every player that's currently on the team and that will be on the team will understand. And I hope they could kind of figure it out. Like, hey, let's just put it aside 4 years. I can do this. You get a scholarship. You have school paid for. You get to play college basketball. It's a fun game. Just go out and play it. Focus on your studies, like Ryan said. And that's it.
Yeah. So let's look ahead. So now we know that Devin and Hunter aren't there, and that is obviously going to hurt the team's depth down low. But still, this is a team that looks to be able to roll out a starting five of Yogi Ferrell, James Blackman Jr., Robert Johnson, Troy Williams, and Thomas Bryant, with still a pretty good bench with Nick Zeisloft and Colin Hartman and who am I forgetting here? Juwan Morgan, Emmett Holt, of course, and OG Anunoby, and again, maybe I'm forgetting someone else, but this is still a team that looks
Tim
pretty
Preller.
deep. Tim Priller, there we go. I knew I was forgetting someone. So let's talk, and again, it looks like now with the 2 scholarships open that Tom Crean and the staff are going to look to continue to fill those. Maybe Max Bielfeldt from Michigan comes in. We don't know. People are still talking about Thon Maker as a second semester guy. I hope that doesn't happen. I know how good Thon is, or how talented, what potentially has, but I'm not really expecting that. So, Chronic, let me get your thoughts now just on how the team is shaping up for next year. Again, it kind of puts us in a spot without Hunter and Devin to where we're a little bit thinner up front, but we should be better. I mean, I think everybody expects Thomas Bryant to be a better, more complete player than Hunter, but now there's really even more pressure on a guy like Emmett Holt to step up. But I feel pretty good about Emmett Holt. I like how he progressed last year. I think he'll be ready for that kind of role. Does losing Devin and Hunter at all change the ceiling for what you think next year's team can be? I'm sorry, that was for Chronic. I didn't direct my question well. But Chronic may not be here, so Ryan, if you want to hop in and answer that question. I think we lost Chronic.
Chronic hopped off.
He hopped off.
I think that Emmett Holt got enough experience this year that he can be relied on as a very solid backup post guy and could even play some with Thomas Bryant. And really, he's become sort of what we thought Devin Davis would be, just kind of a guy who does all the right things, is smart, isn't that big, but fights for everything he's got and works his butt off on the inside. I think he's a great young player. I really like what I saw from him this year, and he's going to have a full off season with the team. Remember, he came in right at the end of summer, so he didn't have the off season to work with the team. He really just kind of came on campus and was thrown into the mix, and so now he's going to have that full year of experience and a full off season, which may be as important as the actual year of experience. I think you're going to get a guy in Juwan Morgan that a lot of people aren't talking about very much, and he's a very talented 4-star power forward, stretch 4 kind of guy. He's not really a jump shooter yet, but I think that he's got the body where if he develops a jump shot, he'll be a more of a stretch 4 kind of guy. He's never going to shoot it like Christian Watford or someone like that, but he's got that same kind of body, and he's much more of a banger on the inside. So I think that you've got a solid foundation behind Thomas Bryant, and you can also use, as we saw, I mean, it's not a desirable situation, but in a pinch you can also use Colin Hartman down there, and of course, hey, Tim Priller, guy can step out and hit a 3. But I think they've got bodies now, and you feel much more confident on the inside than you did entering last season. Bryant's going to be a stud, but the fact that he's a freshman, he's probably only going to be able to give you 25 minutes of really good play. If he has to play more than that, you're going to see him tail off a little bit, particularly early. So I think that you're going to see guys getting that chance to play now, and I think Hunter really would have been his pure backup. Just a guy who can come in and give you defense and rebounding. But the other guys are going to be solid, and I think that they got to be really excited to be able to be in the mix. I mean, it's always a bummer to lose a teammate, but I think that those guys have to be excited about the opportunity.
Chronic, are you back? Do we have you?
I am back. Sorry about that. Had a little freeze up.
No, hey, you're back and you sound even better. So that's quite all right. The question we're kicking around right now is whether or not losing Devin and Hunter changes our thoughts on the ceiling for next year's team. Obviously, it impacts depth some, but does it change how good you think the season can be and the team can be?
To the extent that I think not just our overall talent level, but I think our depth was certainly a part of what I was kind of leaning on and trying to figure out what this team ceiling is going to be. Of note this week, you look at the Swanigan commitment to Purdue, and you look at that type of interior depth, and now we're going to be relying on a freshman, several freshmen actually, to provide that front court presence and resistance against them, and that certainly changes the equation. Now, obviously, not every team we play this year is going to have that type of a front court, but it certainly is going to affect things. I was very, very curious to see where Devin was going to come, if he was going to come back, and exactly where he would be in the rotation in the event that he did, but it was certainly looking forward to big things. I thought Honor's continued progression was going to be really important to this team's success this year. Yeah, I think unquestionably that's going to affect this team's ceiling. I think more than anything now, though, the question becomes, okay, we all know where we are. What are you going to do about it? How much harder are they going to work? How much harder are they going to rededicate themselves, particularly those inside guys, to having to overcome this challenge? There's that mantra in all teams, next man up. It's time for them to really embody that here now that we've lost a couple of those bodies. So I'll be curious to see where it goes. Although, kind of dovetailing off our first topic, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this team responds to kind of the shift in the team's leadership. Tom Crean has made IU, not to, again to borrow the cliche, but really made this a player-driven program. I think it's very much true when it comes to IU basketball. Looking back, I don't think that we make it back to whatever level of relevance they had achieved, or without being player-driven, without guys like Jordan Halls, Verdell Jones, Christian Watford, Derek Elston. You look at the work that those guys put in to bring this program back. I don't care if you have the greatest coaches ever assembled in the history of the world. None of that happens without the players driving it forward. And I think you can look at that and perhaps, or at least look at the vacancy that was created when all those guys left the program and probably get a good understanding of what happened to it in the years following. Tom kind of took some of that back here with this latest move. He put his foot down and asserted some leadership over the culture of the program. I have a feeling that's going to transcend more than just the roster as we start the summer. I think he's probably going to have a bigger influence and impact on the team than maybe he has in the past, maybe he's ever had to now, because once again, we're going to be starting a season relying on a lot of youth. We finally have a senior on the roster this year, but we're going to have a lot of young guys in the rotation. So perhaps the timing for that shift in his team management couldn't be more timely either. So I'm real curious to see exactly how they reflect these changes, both on the roster as well as what's kind of steering the ship.
Yeah, and I think that seems to be something we've talked about for the last couple of years. And you mentioned the void in leadership that has been there since Jordy and Victor and Cody and all those guys left. And maybe it's time for that. And, of course, you don't want two guys to have to be kicked out of the program for that to happen. But if that can help kind of fill the leadership vacuum that has seemed to be there a little bit, because I think one of the worries is that with this team, with expectations really high going into next year, this hasn't always been a program that has been able to keep it together when things start to go wrong. It feels like something will go wrong, and then it's like a 3-game losing streak, and the sky is falling, and sometimes it's almost too late to get it turned back around. And you certainly feel like there's enough talent on next year's team that they're just going to win 20 games just rolling the ball out there because they're going to have the talent. But to actually reach the level of expectations that people have, you're going to have to avoid lows, and you're going to have to avoid things going badly. And you can kind of feel it at the end of last year in the Iowa game, where it's like this promising season turns down, people are booing, and somehow we were able to kind of turn it around in that Northwestern game in the Big Ten tournament and at least make it into the NCAAs and have a little bit of a positive feeling. But the end of that season was about to go off the rails. So Ryan, let me ask you, as you start to look at next year, and you see these high expectations, and Jeff Goodman listing Indiana as one of 10 teams that has a legitimate claim to number 1 heading into the season, and you see Indiana with whatever it is, 25-1 odds to win it all, and this team's starting to be mentioned where we all expect the program to be mentioned. How does that make you feel? Do you think that this team warrants that, or do you think that with the inconsistencies we've seen in the program over the last 2 years, and especially the putrid defense that has to get a lot better with mostly the same roster, do you think that the expectations are a little overinflated and that those could come back to haunt these Hoosiers?
Well, I think that most of these lists are done on a pure talent perspective. Really. And you've got 5 guys who are going to be very good college basketball players next season starting for Indiana. James Blackman Jr. clearly has holes in his game that he's got to fix. Robert Johnson needs to be more consistent. Yogi Ferrell obviously had a great junior year and needs to become a senior leader. Troy Williams, lightning in a bottle sometimes, and could be, a star if he puts things together, and Thomas Bryant is an elite big man coming to IU. That roster alone, I mean, not even considering the backups, yeah, you're going to get accolades. You're going to get preseason hype and things like that. The question is, how do they put it all together? And those lists are, like I said, almost always based on purely on talent, and because you don't know how the team is going to play together, and how those guys are going to look on the court next year. How is it going to change having Brian in there and all that stuff? So I think that really you have to take that stuff with a grain of salt, but I do think just on a pure talent perspective, it makes sense to put them up there. I mean, that is the best starting five we've had in a long time, and I think that the key is going to be, for me at least, is going to be senior leadership, and that's Yogi Ferrell. I mean, he's got to take this program, and make it his, and really lead and actually be that guy that everybody not only looks at in a clutch situation, but also looks up to on and off the court. I think you've got a couple guys with great attitudes coming in with Bryant, Morgan, and Anunoby. Those are three guys who are going to work their tails off and seem to have the right attitude about college basketball and about Indiana as a program, and are just saying all the right things. Hopefully they come in and do all the right things. And when you have that, at both ends of the spectrum, you have the older guys and the younger guys both, really focused and working towards the same goal. Yeah, those expectations are within reach, and I mean, obviously we haven't seen these guys on the court together yet, so we don't know. But I think just from a talent evaluation standpoint, and looking at what that offense could do without a true post player, yeah, I think that top 10 is definitely something that it would be a disappointment if they weren't that kind of team.
I agree. It definitely would be. Well, I'm going to ask you from a student perspective. Last year, kind of a big topic of conversation that it was taking Assembly Hall a while to get filled before games, and some games students weren't showing up, and it really seemed like even when the team was really going well there in January, that the students were kind of keeping the Hoosiers at arm's length a little bit, almost like they were ready for the impending doom of the February-March collapse, which happened to a certain extent. What kind of sense do you get right now about how students are feeling about this team? And maybe it's too early, but how do you project it forward for next year? Do you think the buzz will be back, or do you think that it'll be kind of a wait-and-see approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a little too early to definitely understand the full aspect of it, but after we got Thomas Bryant, I know a lot of my friends were really buzzing about him and just what he could bring to the table and how he could change this team. So I think with the addition of Bryant, I think it could help. I know also Assembly Hall with the renovations, I mean, that's something everyone's been talking about, how it's going to look and all that. So I know that's going to help, but really I think it is a little too early to tell, but I do think that it's going to be better than last year just with all this preseason hype. It's going to just help hopefully generate some buzz around campus.
Yeah, and something else that will generate buzz is Indiana playing Duke, and it seems like whenever these two teams match up, something memorable happens. You've got the Moye block, you've got Marco Killingsworth's dunk, you've got Andre Patterson's 80 points at Madison Square Garden, one of the greatest single performances in IU history. And Chronic, you're going to the game, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I saw that you're going to the game. And I'm curious what kind of Hoosier subterfuge are you planning? Are you going to key an IU into the bathroom at Cameron Indoor Stadium? Do you have any other little secret plan for leaving your IU mark in Krzyzewskiville?
This is one of those things that when I saw this announced, actually before I could even really kind of think about planning for it, my best friend since childhood had already called me and told me that he had reserved rooms at the Durham Hilton for us to go. Awesome. Literally, I think I had a room before I even had the news in hand. This is a trip I've wanted to make for a really, really long time. I'm one of those guys that views basketball gyms as cathedrals, and Cameron is certainly very, very highly regarded as far as national basketball cathedrals go, despite the fact it's the same size as Newcastle High School, but I'm sure that's something we'll remind the Dukies of as the game draws nearer.
Yes.
And then to boot, we found out that evening, we discovered that I believe Maryland is playing UNC the night prior in Chapel Hill. So I've been told Chapel Hill is the place you want to socialize in the evening as well. So we're going to make the Tuesday. We're going to get down there Tuesday evening, and hopefully take in the Maryland UNC game, and then go see what Chapel Hill has to offer, kind of as an appetizer before the Duke IU game. Really, really looking forward to this. We've talked about making the trip there. My friend and I have for a long, long time. He was actually sitting with me, seventh row Assembly Hall when IU played Duke the last time here. I am so looking forward to this trip. Not just that we get to go watch the Hoosiers in Cameron, but it should be a heck of a fight. If the paper ends up translating onto the court. So really, really looking forward to it. As far as some of the shenanigans we have in store, I had to borrow Ty Rogers. He's a former IU baseball player. He does graphics mainly for IU basketball, but I think he contributes for a lot of it. He made a really, really, really awesome poster for that with the
I
IU
saw that.
road. Yeah. I was totally inspired by it. I had to add a little Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas Photoshop because that's kind of the spirit of the trip. I don't know that we're necessarily going to be packing any ether or LSD, but we are going to make this one of those revelry-filled, life-altering experiences is the plan so far. So I'll keep you guys posted as the details emerge that are at least not going to get me in jail.
Well, and to boot, you get to watch maybe 2 of the 10 best games of the college basketball season right there. I mean, those could be, by that point in the season, I don't know, 4 top 10 teams. Because I guess all 4 of those teams would be projected in the top 10, won't they?
I think Maryland and UNC are kind of swapping number 1, number 2. They're both in the top 3 in a lot of the projections. So that could be perhaps the best, at least as far as rankings go, college basketball games in the non-conference season. So looking forward to them both. This is going to be one of those great trips. God bless the wives that didn't bat an eye and said go for it because they knew exactly what it meant when you say IU at Cameron. This is going to be a really big time. I'm looking forward to it.
It's huge. It's huge. So what, out of all those memories, of all the IU Duke memories, what's your favorite memory? And I know it's like choosing between children, but is there one that sticks out over the other ones?
It's tough to top the NCAA tournament game, the AJ Moye block. That was one of the most improbable wins. Forget about IU Duke. That was one of the most improbable IU comebacks I've ever seen in my life. I wish I would have been there. Wasn't. I was watching that one on TV, but that was actually the game that prompted me to come to Bloomington. I was living in Indianapolis at the time. From that moment forward, I watched every remaining tournament game in B-Town from that point forward, and that paid some great dividends.
We probably passed each other in drunken stupors on Kirkwood during those 2 weeks.
There was one point when we just beat Oklahoma. My brother was a student here at the time. He was living on High Street, just behind TIS, like a block and a half behind TIS. And after we won, we headed over to 3rd Street and we're making our way to Kirkwood. And actually saw a Mercedes convertible rear end another car right in front of us. And there were girls that were sitting on the back deck of the convertible, and luckily no one was injured. But there was literally tens of thousands of dollars of damage done to these 2 vehicles. They were still drivable. No information was exchanged. They high-fived, said, "Go Hoosiers." Everybody got back in their car, and we all headed to Kirkwood. It was it was a sight. As far as awesome. Live, the 05 Duke game, we were talking about this a little before the broadcast. That Killingsworth dunk, probably the loudest singular event that I've maybe ever heard Assembly Hall. It's tough, when Watford hit that shot, the heavens opened up and my ears pretty much just rang for 3 days straight. I think Kentucky was probably the loudest game overall, sustained noise that I've heard. That gym was probably an 11 before they tipped. But man, when IU mounted that comeback against Duke and Killingsworth hit that dunk, like Ryan said earlier, I don't want to steal his thunder here, but the roof really did lift off that gym. That was a moment I will never for my life forget. Not just the experience, but the feeling. You could feel the noise coming through at that time. That was something else, man.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm guessing that's your favorite IU Duke memory.
Yeah, I was covering that game for the IDS as the basketball columnist on the floor, maybe 5th row in press row, and that's when they used to have the press right behind one of the baskets. And we were I wrote in my column the day of the game. If you're coming to that game, you show up 20 minutes early and let Duke know what they're going to be dealing with in warm-ups. And I got to say, there were 10 minutes on the clock for warm-ups. That was the loudest I've ever heard Assembly Hall. I wasn't at the Kentucky game. I can only imagine how loud that was. But by tip-off, the hair on my arms was standing up. It was so loud. And I had the beat writers were sitting on either side of me, and to talk to each other, we had to scream into each other's ears, right up against our ears. And Chronic is right. When that dunk, when Killingsworth hit that dunk, I mean it absolutely was like the roof lifted off. It was as loud as I've ever heard anywhere. I've been at some big NFL games, baseball games, whatever. There was nothing like that. And he's right. That was when sound had feel. I mean, it was reverberating off of your body, and it was amazing. And we were just sitting there on the floor. I mean, at the epicenter of it all, just kind of looking at each other like, wow, like, how do we even put this into words, And after that game, Mike Krzyzewski, in his press conference, and we're sitting right there, I was in the first row of his press conference, he said, "That is the greatest atmosphere I have ever been at for a college basketball game." And he paused, and he caught himself, and he said, "Outside of Cameron." And and then
I remember that.
And I remember Mike, and we all just kind of were like, and then he, of course, caught himself. But and then Mike Davis, his quote was, "The fans were unfreaking believable," and he's right. That was unbelievable. That is one I will never forget. I even if I wasn't an Indiana fan, that was an experience I will never forget. And I was actually working the 2002 tournament run. I was actually working at a bar that night. I was a busboy at a bar on the side to make extra money during the tournament. And that whole game unfolded, and I was such a sports nut that I just said screw it to my duties, and I'm watching the game. And I've always just had a thing against Duke. I wasn't going to IU yet. I wasn't necessarily. I mean, I'd always liked Indiana, but I wasn't a huge fan at the time. But that comeback and that game was unbelievable. And the people who were at IU at that time, you are so lucky you got the team you were rooting for to do that. That was just unbelievable, and it was an unbelievable run for them. But that game, I can see somebody who was at the school, having that as their top. There's absolutely no shame in that. But for me, it was the 05 game, and that feeling I will remember that till the day I die. It was amazing.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely the game in 2002 when Indiana made that ridiculous comeback because everybody thought the game was over. And I was pledging my fraternity then, and we were taking like an exam, and I actually missed a portion of the comeback because we had to do our exam, and then we all watched it from inside the business school bathroom. There was a little TV up in the corner of the lounge, and we watched it from in there, and then everybody sprinted out and ran to Kirkwood, and it was just like packed person to person. It was unbelievable. Will, were you alive for any of the IU Duke games?
Well, I definitely was alive during the 2002 one, but yeah, I never saw any back in the day, so I'm excited to see this one. I'm really looking forward to it.
Hey, it's coming of age for IU fans. You got to have your IU Duke memory, and so hopefully you'll be able to create one with this matchup here.
I got to mention this. One of my favorite things about the 05 game was maybe, I think he had to have been like maybe a 10-year-old kid, had a sign, and he was sitting on the court with his parents, and every time there was like a break on the floor before the game, he would walk around the baseline with the sign up, and it said, "Hey Duke, remember us?" And it was the shot of Mike Davis and AJ Moye running off the court when they won at the thing. And then the other sign I had was because that was Josh McRoberts was a freshman, and that was his first game back in Indiana, and everybody hated that kid because he was such I don't know if it was his family or what, but he just had an attitude in his senior year of high school about Indiana and all these things. And that year was the year that Luke Zeller had upset him as Mr. Basketball, and so somebody had a great sign that said "McNot Mr. Basketball," and it was a picture of Zeller, who was blown up in a big picture, and then McRoberts was maybe this big. It was great.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love reminiscing about memories like this. Okay, so Ryan has some hot sports opinions about Caleb Swanigan, which I want to get to in a minute, but I don't know if you've heard them yet, Chronic. So let me go to you first. because I don't live in Indiana. I've never seen the kid play. How big of a commitment is that for Purdue? You think getting Swanigan their first Mr. Basketball since the big dog?
It's huge, and what blows my mind more than anything about this is the fact that Matt Painter just beat Calipari for a 5-star recruit. I'm still trying, like days later now, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that very fact, because this is like, the first moon landing for an IU guy here. I've never seen this before. The world's never seen this before. It might give you pause as to how exactly it happened, but then when you learn a little bit more about the, maybe some of the influencers around him, it makes a little more sense. How it happened, why it happened, though, I'm still trying to figure out. 5-star kids, usually they're not willing to go play behind somebody or in any capacity where maybe they're not going to have the sole spotlight. And with the front court depth Purdue already has, I don't know. Kudos to his mentor, handler, whatever you want to call him, for being able to deliver for his alma mater. But good for Purdue. It's been a long time since they've had a Mr. Basketball. I don't know if it's been mentioned yet, but let's make note that IU's had 7 Indiana Mr. Basketball winners since Purdue had their last in Glenn Robinson. So, they were probably due to get one. It's a hell of a front court, though, guys. That's 3 guys with NBA potential. They're going to be in the conversation. They're very squarely in the conversation for perhaps the best front court in the nation right now. So good for them. I think college basketball is better. The Big Ten is better when IU and Purdue are healthy in their rivalry and they're both competitive. So good for Purdue. I'm still trying to figure out how exactly you play against that, especially with our depleted front court depth now. But it's going to be
run, and shoot like hell.
Yeah.
We're going to have to straight. So, Ryan, I know you have some thoughts on this. Would you like to chime in on Mr. Swanigan?
Yeah, I think really for Swanigan, from what I've heard, it really came down to Cal or Purdue. I mean, I know Calipari and Kentucky came in late because they're so depleted, and they're really scrambling to fill out their roster after all those guys bolted. I do think he had an opportunity to go to Kentucky and play a ton, but what I've heard about Swanigan since last spring is just how much baggage there is around him and around his situation, however you want to call it, with his handlers and his parents and all these things. If Michigan State really, really, really desperately wanted him, they would have been able to hold on to him, I think. And they just didn't seem Izzo did not seem to want to bend over backwards to keep the kid. I mean, he's talented. There's no question about his talent. But I think he's also a guy who people have told him he's a one and done. He's a 6'7", he's listed at 6'8" or 6'9", but he's really about 6'7" last time he got measured. 270-pound post guy. He's going to be a good college basketball player. Don't get me wrong, but there are people who are, Indiana fans who want to jump off a bridge because Purdue got this guy. I just don't see him as he was a phenomenal high school basketball player and absolutely deserved Mr. Basketball. There's no question about that. I'm just, as far as translating to the next level, he's not a guy who scares me, who I'm going to be shaking in my boots over. I mean, I'm much more concerned with A.J. Hammonds. And I think he'll be a solid player for Purdue. I think he'll be a good player, but I don't think he's as good as he thinks he is, and I don't think he's as good as some people think he is. And I've never been a huge Purdue hater. I mean, I don't want them to beat us. I'm not a fan. I don't root for them. I wouldn't rip a guy just for going to Purdue, and I just think he's a guy who, when he committed to Michigan State, I said the same things. I just was not super impressed with him. I think that Brian is a much better player and has a much bigger upside, and I'm happy that he wound up going to IU. But the Swanigan situation, there's just so many, variables and weird things that were going on that it's just hard for me to get too excited about a guy who has that much going on, around him and that many people in his head telling him to do things and what he deserves and who he compares to and all of these things. It's like, just go out there and play basketball and leave the kid be. Let him play. Let him do his thing. So, yeah, it's just something that, I mean, let me put it this way: the Indiana coaches essentially stopped recruiting him last summer, from what I've been told. Not they didn't stop, but they determined he wasn't a fit for whatever reason, and they went after other guys. And whatever reasons they had for that, I'm sure were good ones, because this staff does know what it's doing when it comes to recruiting.
See, as far as that goes, too, I want to chime in here, too. It's my understanding that perhaps we were not necessarily welcomed in that recruitment. And that's perhaps a broader Fort Wayne issue as well than just one particular guy. But it's not been the most fertile grounds for Indiana for a little while, and I don't think that's coincidental.
Right, and no, and I completely agree with that. It was definitely a two-way street, that recruitment kind of ending. But I think that with guys in the past, they've still tried to make overtures and still pushed for it. And with Swannick, they just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, forget it. It's not worth it. And I don't know if that was a talent thing or if it was just the attitude of everybody involved. And look, the kid could have had zero interest in going to IU. I'm not saying Purdue got him because Indiana didn't want him. That is certainly not the case. But I think that it's also telling that they didn't even push for they didn't even try, essentially, for an uncommitted Mr. Basketball at all, especially when we have front court needs.
So we are a show of the people, and even though I don't necessarily like addressing this topic, every time I ask for questions, we get them. So let's keep it short. Chronic, Ryan, and Will, chime in if you have anything to add here, but let me just get 30 seconds on Thonmaker. Is it even a possibility, and would we want him as just a one-semester guy? Ryan, you can go first, if you have anything.
Look, he's an incredibly talented player. There's no question about that. I have said in the past that I think that at his development point right now, he's better than Kevin Durant was. The difference is Durant made a huge jump from his senior year of high school to his freshman year of college. The problem is, I don't. Why would anybody want the guy to come in January and play? I mean, it's not like he's going to be on campus for that first semester not playing, like he's suspended or something, where he can practice with the team, or he's injured or something. He can do work with the team. He's going to be coming in January, learning the offense, learning how to mesh with these guys. When your team has already developed chemistry in the non-conference, I feel like that's the ultimate, because he's only going to be a one-semester guy. He's going to go pro. We all know that. And I just don't see that being appealing. He's a phenomenally talented guy, but it's a little too mercenary for me. I mean, you welcome that kind of talent at any time, but this just feels weird. To come in a for one semester of basketball is just the ultimate sort of FU to the rules, really. And I mean, it's legal, but it's just absurd. And I just think that at this point, Indiana should focus on what it has. Maybe add a graduate transfer if they need more post depth, but just focus on what you got. I realize he's a unique talent, but how's he going to fit in for 3 months with these guys? I just don't see it happening. I think this is a situation where he's going to wind up at Kentucky or Kansas maybe, but I don't even think Bill Self really wants to deal with it unless he's been very good at getting Canadian guys, but I really don't know how this is going to work, and it's just absurd. If he was coming in for the fall semester, I would say, yeah, sure. If you never turn down talent, but right now this is just an absurd situation, and I just don't see it benefiting Indiana basketball as a whole to have him come in for 3-4 months.
What do you think, Chronic? Are you holding your breath at all with Mr. Maker?
Yeah, but for not the same reasons that most people would think. I'm kind of my breath is bated because I'm a little concerned by it, honestly. This is a guy, clearly, as Ryan said, he's a remarkable talent. I mean, he's an NBA talent. There's no doubt about that. He's got a really, really remarkable personal story. But part of that is, you got a young kid with a real, real high ceiling. There's a lot of money in his future, and you've got a lot of people that are kind of steering him along the way. I think he's on his 4th high school right now. He's now living in his 3rd continent. He's something. I'll say this much, though. It's a late spring signee. Well, I guess with this reclassification, he's technically not. But, yeah, I just see red flags, man, and perhaps none of them so bigger than whenever kids have handlers, that's always something that I think is concerning. But more than anything, the December edition is problematic for me because with the chemistry that we were just talking about earlier in the show and trying to see exactly how this thing comes out, non-conference season is very much when the recipe starts to take hold and you get a flavor of what's to come. And I think you run a really, really high risk in late December, and all of a sudden you're adding new ingredients into the mix right on the cusp of the conference season. It's high risk, high reward, but I think the risk might outweigh the benefit in this situation. I'm not saying I wouldn't take the kid. I don't necessarily think we're going to get the kid, but it's one of those where at the end of the day, I think it's a distraction. That we don't necessarily need to be dealing with at this point. Let's let's focus on what we have and work on making the most out of that. Again, this is one of those things that where for all the conversations and the pros and cons of the one and done era and what that actually means and maybe perhaps how overblown that thing's become, this isn't even a one and done. This is a half and done. One of my biggest issues here as of late has been the continuity in the roster and the continuity of the team. And this certainly doesn't take it in a positive direction, in my opinion. This is kind of a continuation of the problem that when you're shifting things up and you're turning over so much roster space so frequently and so importantly in the roster, it's really tough. I mean, this is not something that I think is healthy for the game. It's not something I think is healthy for IU at this juncture, or any juncture for that matter, really. It is where we are, and I appreciate the fact that we're even able to compete in that. There's something to be said for guys like Calipari who can completely rebuild a roster pretty much ground up every year and attain that kind of success. And by success, I mean getting guys in the draft, because clearly wins and national championships, that's not why we all follow college basketball. We're really just IU fans to see who we can get drafted next. So, yeah. But by the way, and I put apologies in advance for taking us on a tangent. How absolutely ridiculous is that statement? I mean, you guys realize he just renewed his contract, or he extended his contract for $7 million to start, and then it starts climbing from there on. Do you really think the University of Kentucky, does he really think Kentucky is paying him $7 million a year to put kids in the draft?
I wonder if he really believes that, though. I mean, I know to a certain extent he does, but that's, they've kind of differentiated themselves as the place where you accumulate tons of God, why am I defending Kel? Just shut up, Jared. Someone else take it. I mean, you know what I'm saying, though? I wonder if he's kind of sly like a fox with a statement like that, where he knows that's their differentiator, and it's how they get talent, and if he just rolls the dice enough with a talented roster, eventually they'll win. So
here's my take on it. He said that as a recruiter, purely as a recruiter, to send a message to kids, because you're always selling your program. You got to find a way to sell your program, and he's selling the program as come here and you'll get drafted high. Mm-hmm. And that's the message he's sending. It's the message he's been sending for a while. And look, to his credit, I mean, I can't stand the guy. I think he's a worm, but to his credit, he got those kids this year to buy into being a team, and they played like a team for a long time. And, they were very close to going undefeated. And I think most people thought going into the tournament that there were only a few teams that could stop them. So, to his credit, he made it work this year, but I don't think that's a formula that works every year. I really don't. I don't think it can. But
I'm going to give him more credit than you will even. Not only is he recruiting and selling his school, he's also covering his own ass, because when you've got that much NBA talent on your team and you can't run the table, that sure gives you a convenient back door to explain to the insane faithful that Big Blue Nation's comprised of why you didn't. Because I'm sure, just like Crean after the Syracuse game, Calipari is going to hear this one for some time until he can achieve some success that makes them forget about that. So, all credit to him for the BS line of the year, that he's just there to get kids in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, I was on a radio show before the tournament. Somebody said which coach is under the most pressure, and I think he was hoping I would say Crean, because we had just talked about Korea, and I said, no, it's Calipari by far. If he doesn't win with this team, I mean, I mean, he had it handed to him on a silver platter when you're talking about talent-wise. So, absolutely, I completely agree with you. He's covering his own butt, and he's coming up with any way, because they went all in on a national championship this year, and they did not get it. So,
Yep. All right. So before we get to final thoughts, real quick, I want to do a little promotion here for NameOnTheCourt.com. Can you see this? So Scott Hopkins, let me get back to the mic here. Scott Hopkins, who is one of our loyal listeners for the Assembly Call, he runs Name on the Court. It's a guy, he's on our email list. He emails me all the time, and he runs this great site called NameOnTheCourt.com, which you can see right here. And so I have one of these hanging. As you can see, it says the Assembly Call in there and another victorious episode. So I wanted to just suggest this for Father's Day. And I think he's got a deal going for Father's Day, but if you go to NameOnTheCourt.com, you can check this out. They're really, really cool. I mean, I got one because I love it and have it hanging up in my office. So it's on NameOnTheCourt.com. And Scott, we really appreciate all of your support for the Assembly Call. So anything that we can do to help you out, we definitely want to do. So for the IU fan in your life, you get to customize it. You get a little message on there. It actually puts their name on the court in basketballs. Picture of Assembly Hall, for those of you who couldn't see the picture and are listening on the podcast. It's a really, really cool product, and the quality is really high. And you may have seen Jordan Hulls was doing a promotion with them and donating a portion of the proceeds to his charity. So go check out their site. They've got some great stuff. And it's a great gift for the IU fan in your life. So that said, let's move on to some final thoughts. And I want to preface final thoughts by sending a nice comment Stan Robinson's way. Obviously, Stan is transferring. He's going to Rhode Island. Max Hotzel is going to San Diego State. We want to wish both of those guys a lot of luck in their future, a lot of success in their future stops. But I was really impressed with how Stan left Indiana. I don't know if you guys saw it, but the tweet I think that he sent to OG Anunoby, where he basically wished him good luck and basically told him don't make the same mistakes that I made and do things the right way. And I thought it showed a lot of maturity for Stan to say that. And it was just, it impressed me. And those who listen to the show know that myself and Andy also, we've almost been irrational defenders of Stan Robinson, kind of hoping and waiting without really any visual evidence that this would happen, that he would kind of turn into the player that we all thought because of his unique skills, being able to get to the bucket, being able to play defense, and that never happened in an IU uniform. But I was impressed with how he handled his exit from Indiana, and so just wanted to send some positive thoughts to him as he did on his way outdoor to some incoming Hoosiers, and hopefully they heed his advice, because Stan obviously made some mistakes, but it seems like he's learned from them. So anyway, I just wanted to say that about Stan. And feel free to comment on that. But otherwise, let's go to some final thoughts. And Chronic, we will start with you.
I will say, it seems like not just Stan for that matter, but I don't know if you guys saw Honor's kind of exit interview with Peegs today.
Yeah.
There has been a high level of contriteness coming from the departed this year, and we haven't heard from Devin yet. I assume he's probably devastated. I assume his family's probably pretty devastated by it all, but that seems to be the undercurrent behind all those sentiments, if you will, that they're understanding of what happened, of why they're now seeking other homes, and they're sorry it didn't work out better. It's, you hate to see it happen. At the same time, you really, really hope that everyone involved grows to be stronger because of it. As an IU fan, you obviously, you're concerned for the program, but you're also concerned for the welfare of the guys. I wish Stan nothing but the best. Same thing goes for Honor, especially for Devin. This was extremely unfortunate that Devin's career here had to end that way. I really hope the kid is able to play ball again. I hope I'm able to watch him run. I can't imagine what it was like for everybody involved to have endured what we did over the last several months and then see it end this way. There was actually a video that somebody at the scene had taken of following Devin's accident. It was never made public. I'd never solicited it. It was sent to me. I deleted it. But to understand to see visually the extent of what he was faced with in the very moments after the accident, and to see his blood flowing down 17th Street, it was really, really tough. And I can't imagine what it was like for his family. I can't imagine what it was like for the Creans to be there with him all this time and not be able to see him to his personal finish line. So I really hope he makes it, and I hope he does well with it. It's a tough deal, but like I said, I think everybody's going to come out of this thing better. I don't know. I will say, too, let me go on my final thought. This has been one of the better weeks for Tom Crean, probably since the spring of 13. I retweeted Pete Palmer's tweet this week that he had shared from a Facebook friend, and it showed Tom helping some unfortunate folks, some guys that were maybe down on their luck over on East 3rd Street here this week. And I thought it was a really cool scene, and I think Coach Crean very much deserved to be recognized for some of the stuff he does away from the court. A lot of us kind of focus on the score sheets and the records and everything else, and we forget that we're dealing with real human beings with real feelings and real personalities and characters. And I think one thing that does get lost, and I'll be the first one to admit it, I am certainly no stranger to pointing out some of the issues I have with some things involving Coach Crean's decisions. That's not the first time I've seen Coach Crean do that. I've actually, in just a couple lots down the street, he and I both live on the east side, and apparently we're both coffee people. I've seen Coach Crean do things similar to that, where he, without the need for attention or cameras or for any way publicizing himself, is just reaching out with people who very clearly and obviously need a hand at the time. And I'm proud to say he's our coach for that regard, because he is a good man. He's done a lot of good things in this community. He continues to. And kudos to Tom Crean. Good on him. I'm glad that a lot of people got to see him in a light that I've been fortunate enough to see him behaving in for pretty much his entire existence. Like, I can't say that I've ever, in probably over 100 interactions publicly, seen Coach Crean fail to give an autograph, fail to take a selfie, fail to be anything but giving with the people that support him and his team. And like I said, this is not the first time I've seen him reach out to somebody for no reason other than he's just trying to be a good person. And yeah, good on him. Good week for the program. Good week for him. Let's just keep it going.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I wanted to mention that, and I forgot it. So I appreciate that, Chronic. And I'm sure Ryan was taking good notes so that when he sends out this month's edition of Tom Crean Fan Club newsletter, he'll have plenty of information.
I'm not a subscriber, so I wouldn't be getting it otherwise.
Sorry, Ryan. Usually we rip on the guy who's not here, but Andy, I guess you're getting whatever. Will, your final thought?
Yeah, my final thought, you guys have been talking about a lot, and I've just been listening, which has been nice. I've been enjoying being on the show for the first time. I'm excited to grow and see what more we can do this year. I'm looking forward to not only Indiana's basketball season, but our basketball season, and I think there's going to be some more buzz getting generated here on campus, and I'm looking forward to help create some of that buzz, and I am just looking forward to another outstanding season.
Hey, Will, before we go, too, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're in B-Town this summer, I assume, right?
Back and forth between there and home.
I'll tell you what, man. Someday when you're free, give me a buzz.
All right, that sounds like a plan. Thank you very much, Chronic.
Let's get together. We'll go grab some lunch, grab a drink. Let's go do something together.
All right, that sounds like a plan to me.
And also, Will, as you kind of, part of what we're trying to do together as we work together is learn about online marketing and getting your name out there. This is a great opportunity. Plug your new project, because I'm excited about your new project, and this is a good time to let everybody know what you're doing. Hijack the show. Go ahead.
All right, hijacking the assembly call. So, luckily, thank you, Jared, for giving me the opportunity. I have founded the Dub Bears Brothers. It is the exact same thing here as the assembly call, but I'm going to put my personal twist on it for the Chicago Bears. So if any of you guys out there are a Chicago Bears fan, please follow me on Twitter @TheBearsBros. You can check out our website, thebearsbros.com. I'm going to be coming up with some new material here soon, as well as some podcasts, just like Jared does as well. But I would hope you guys tune in if you are a Bears fan, and if you're not, just give it a listen and hopefully you can grow to become a nice Bears fan too.
Excellent. I'm excited about that project. It's going to be really good. Ryan, your final thought.
Hey, Will, if you're going to be working with us more closely, you got to realize I'm the one who hijacks the show. All right, kid?
All right.
No, I'm glad Chronic mentioned the thing with Crean helping those two guys out. I think that a lot of people saw him in a different light. I think it's nice to get a reminder every once in a while, as he said, that we're dealing with a real person, and a person who genuinely, from everything everybody talked about, is a great person. Off the court. I have not been a fan of a lot of the decisions on the court or with the roster and things like that, as most people I think would agree. There have been some questionable decisions, but he's also a great representative for Indiana basketball, and I think that we were all reminded of that this week, and I think that was a good reminder to get, especially right around the time as two guys have been removed from the roster. So I agree it was a good week. What I want to go back to is what we talked about the last time, and I just think that people need to be excited about this team again. I mean, we've got a real chance to have a special season, and it's going to be, I think, it's exciting, and this team is going to play in some big games in the non-conference. This might be the toughest schedule of Crean's tenure here. They're going out to Maui with a phenomenal lineup of teams: Kansas, UCLA. I mean, how awesome would it be if Steve Alford against Tom Crean in one of those games, and then maybe Indiana, Kansas, two teams and programs that get compared to each other all the time. People always say that Lawrence and Bloomington are kind of like each other, and they're very college-centric towns, and then the programs and the schools are very like each other. I mean, that's a great matchup there if IU can win some games and get there. I mean, so that and then you've got the Duke game, obviously, that everybody's looking forward to at Cameron. So I think it's just, and then you've got a good Purdue team, a good Maryland team, and a good Indiana team. I mean, those three teams could be fighting it out. I mean, those Purdue games, when was the last time that an Indiana-Purdue game decided the Big Ten championship or decided the upper tier of the Big Ten? It's been a while. So, this is just a season to be excited about, and you've got a great roster. You've got some great kids. I mean, these guys are all the kind of guys you can root for, and we finally got a big man again, which is, we've been dying on the vine for a big man for so long. It feels like we haven't had one for years. I mean, I realize we had Vonleh last year, but it just seems like it's been so long without a real post presence. So I'm just very excited. I think all fans should be excited. Even if you question coaching decisions, you question this, question whatever, be excited about these players and this team and this roster. It's going to be, I mean, I love the summer, but it's going to be a long summer because I want to get into basketball. I am ready for that season to tip off, and I'm very excited.
Let me also say this, too, real quick, while we're talking about Purdue. One thing I failed to mention, they're the inverse of IU this year, and very purposely trying to throw some water on their raging fan fire here. Unless you got guards, good luck talking for a national championship. So keep that in mind, too.
Completely agree. Oh, by the way, I want to thank Chronic for coming on. Always great having him, and Will, great to have you with us as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
And while I'm jumping in here out of order, let me also say, if you go to Name on the Court, which I do totally agree is an awesome product, I hope there's one with my name on it for Father's Day. If you use the code JHNLH, as in Jordan Hall's Never Lose Hoop, 10% of your purchase price is discounted. 10% of your purchase price goes toward Jordan's charity Never Lose Hoop, which helps a lot of kids in need. So, awesome product, awesome way to make sure that some of that purchase money, which is very reasonable for a very cool product, goes to a great cause as well. So, JHNLH when you go buy your name on the court.
Yep. Absolutely. Let them know that Assembly Call sent you. And Chronic, by the way, I hope you know that Periscope was invented for your trip to out east for that IU Duke game. So I hope there's going to be some live broadcasting of the hijinks.
I am Team Android, and I check every other day to see if they finally got it for Android yet, and they don't, and I'm dying for it. You have no idea.
I'm Android too.
The day they do, We're going to go cruise on campus together. We're going to go take a drive out to Lake Monroe together. I'm going to periscope your butts off. I assume by the time IU Duke rolls around, you're going to see enough stuff to lock me up for years and years to come. It's going to be glorious. I have so many plans for Periscope's application to Android. Just wait. It's coming.
And I think that mental image is the perfect way to sign off for the evening. We appreciate all of you being here and watching live. To everybody who's listening on the podcast, we thank you as well. Again, nameonthecourt.com. Will, give me the website. Is it dubbearsbros.com?
Yeah, dubbearsbros. Yeah, dubbearsbros.com. Also, could I say one more thing?
Hell yes, you can.
All right. Well, I just Googled it because I was curious, and I just found Periscope for Android guys.
Uh-oh.
Get out. No. It's
breaking news.
It's something else. It's like they totally copied it, put a name on a different app. It's not the Periscope.
Right.
It's something else going on there. I've seen that.
Oh, well. All right, and make sure if you're not on our email list, go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and get on it. We've been doing about every other week a link roundup, so if you can't stay hyper-focused on your IU basketball news and you just want to get the highlights every other week or so, stay on there, and hopefully now it's a lot more highlights as we move forward. We've spent, it feels like, the last 5 or 6 weeks, what is Yogi going to do? And then it feels like there's stability, and then obviously we have Devin and Hunter leave, but it feels like maybe now finally, with the exception of a grad transfer or two, we know what the roster will be. So we can really, for real this time, start looking forward, and we'll have a few more shows coming up and plenty that we'll be sending out on the email list. So thank you again for watching live. Thank you for listening on the podcast, and we will talk to you on the next episode of the Assembly Call.